Hello everyone. It was announced yesterday at Axel Rudukubana's trial for the mass murder of 3 girls and many others that were injured and will frankly have their lives changed forever, was sentenced to 52 years in jail at a minimum. He will have no chance of parole until he is the age of 70. This, by the way, was after 3 attempts from Rudukubana to try and disrupt the trial by effectively pretending he was having a heart attack. He was not taking it seriously. There's even lines from the police saying that effectively he was glad that girls died as a result of his actions. I'm really trying to layer it on here. There is absolutely no rehabilitating this man. No chance at all. And even if it was, step one I think would put him into a suicidal frenzy, effectively. If you actually realise that you have stabbed and killed young girls, any normal person would frankly feel suicidal after that. But either way, I don't think he's ever going to get to that position. Now, whether we call that justice or not is kind of what this entire video is about. If you want details on the murders and things like that, these things are all over the internet. You can find them. The mainstream media is reporting it as well. I don't particularly want to go through details of that. It's largely very harrowing and very irrelevant to things I have to say about it. The man stabbed and killed children, that's about all we need to know. If you want to go into details, by all means do, but as far as I'm aware, the family really don't want people going around the internet talking about the details of the injuries the girls sustained and just the whole case in general. As far as I'm concerned, stabbing kids is kind of beyond the bar for, well, the things I'm going to be talking about when it comes to adequate punishment. I'm much more interested in institutional failures and how this case was just completely missed by police. Because naturally, after Axel Rudukubana was arrested, officers searched his house. It was 2 hours, by the way, after the incident. And police said it became clear that it was no random act of violence but a planned and premeditated attempt to commit murder. Apparently it was clear. It was clear that they did that. Inside a sealed plastic container in his bedroom was an unknown substance, and it was confirmed on August 2 to be a lethal toxin, ricin. Rudukubana had purchased the ingredients and equipment needed to make the poison from Amazon under a false name in 2022. Again, by the way, I just want to point out the deflection to the fact he bought an awful lot of things, including knives from Amazon, absolutely irrelevant to the case. The only reason they want to bring up Amazon, as I keep saying, is to attack Jeff Bezos because he owns his own little media empire, and obviously the Times and all that are in competition with that. They could have just said from an online store, no, they have to mention Amazon every time, and it's just plain as day what they're trying to do. He had learnt how to make ricin after downloading an academic study of an Al-Qaeda manual on 2 occasions in 2021. This manual, police said, gave the teenager a clear idea of how to commit significant acts of violence, including with the use of a knife, knowledge she had determined to put into practice. In a cardboard box under the floorboards of his bedroom, police discovered a pestle and mortar, safety goggles, 2 funnels, and a conical flask, on which ricin residue was detected. A machete, a scabbard, and a set of arrows in a black holdall were also found, as well as cigarette lighters, bottles, and matches. 2 tablets on a laptop containing violent and extremist material, including images of tortures, beheadings, were also taken for analysis. He had an interest in war and conflict across the world, including Gaza, Ukraine, Sudan, the Mau Mau uprising, and the activities of Nazi Germany. Rudukubana had taken pains to erase much of his browsing history. Unfortunately, I don't think he realises that your IP and router will mean that, well, your internet service provider will know your internet history. The article also goes on to say that Rudukubana was sleeping on the sofa in the living room, and this was a picture of the living room, and it's just a tip. It's just a complete tip, and it basically sounds like he was sleeping in the living room because his bedroom was being used as his own personal armoury. Because they found machetes, they found arrows with a bow, obviously it was his ricin lab as well. It's just a mess, and it leads you to think, well, obviously it was mentioned the other day that police had turned up at his house before. How is it not fairly noticeable that, well, this is basically the bedroom of a wrong-un? Again, all the police forced him to do before was to sign a contract saying, don't be a naughty boy again. And what did it do? Oh, it led into stabbing multiple girls. But as I say, given the other day I went through a video talking about him going to prevent 3 times, they didn't do anything because they technically couldn't find any sort of rigid ideology that he was extreme for. You know, this guy was just generally evil. Apparently that's not good enough to send him into an institution. When he actually did commit crimes, there were failures there with the police as well. Police told Axel Rudokubana's mother to keep knives out of his reach 2 years before the Southport attack, after he was caught carrying a blade on a bus. Lancashire police are facing questions over the handling of the sadistic teenager in the years before he murdered 3 young girls and tried to kill 10 others at the Taylor Swift dance class last summer. It can now be revealed that officers failed to arrest Rudokubana when he was found in possession of a knife on a bus in March 2022. Instead of detaining the then 15-year-old, who had also been excluded from school in 2019 for carrying a knife, they took him home and gave his mother advice regarding securing knives in the home, said the Assistant Chief Constable at Lancashire Police, Mark Winstanley. The incident can be revealed after Rudokubana, now 18, was jailed for 52 years on Thursday for the murders of 6-year-old Bebe King, Elise Stancombe, 7, and Elisa da Silva Aguirre, 9, and the attempted murder of 10 others. The bus incident, which came after Rudokubana's mother had reported him missing, was one of 4 police call-outs to the family home in 6 months to May 2022. And yes, I wanted to point that out because most of I think all of those incidents actually in the call-outs to the family home were actually called out by his family. And this is the thing. Effectively, what the family seemed to do with this was, oh, our boy's clearly a bit mental and he's doing dangerous things and we're aware of that. Let's, refer him to Prevent. Let's call the police on him. And it's actually the institutions that failed. As far as I can tell, the family wasn't too bad with this. Although, having said that, I have absolutely no idea why the living situation was what it was with the house. I kind of get the feeling that the mother and father were quite absent from the house, because I do not understand how the living room got in that condition and how their son was making rice in. How was their son making rice in without their knowledge? I mean, I know there's all these things of, Axel's autistic, and so, he might have been very, very concerned about his privacy, but the fact of the matter is that if your child is this private, and obviously has been done before for having knives in his possession in public and things like that, I don't understand why you'd let him have that privacy, quite frankly. Because apparently they might be making rice in. But to be honest, my much bigger question is, how did the police manage to fail to properly address this child who, well, I think child's still the wrong word, teenager, this teenager who was on the eve of becoming 18, caught multiple times with weapons outside of his home, on a bus for God's sake. Prevent knew about his obsession with violence and things like that. The police will have known about his obsession with violence, and there seemed to be absolutely no appetite to actually try and deal with this problem properly. What's the reason for this? Well, frankly, I think part of the reason is that, because obviously Axel was black, the police didn't want to be called institutionally racist for seeming to be quite heavy-handed about this black teenager. Oh, but you've not been perceived as being heavy-handed on this black teenager, and now he's killed a load of girls. It needs to be said multiple times, the Equality Act needs to go. We need to leave this paradigm of being worried about looking racist or being perceived as racist, because you're doing your job how you would do it with any other white guy. Anyway, as a clear result of all this, the family of the Southport attacker have been moved to a secret location by police for their protection. Lived with the community church in Southport, where Axel Rudokubana's father, Alphonse, was a valued part of the congregation, released a statement addressing previous speculation about him after his son's plea, where effectively they just make it clear that the family is Christian and they are a valued part of the Christian community there, and also that the boy Axel was struggling with mental health issues and autism, which, I'm not being funny, I know loads of people who struggle with that, especially in our circles of the internet, and they are not murderers. But either way, the family going into hiding was inevitable and, well, just makes sense, to be honest. But now we get on to the political response to all this, and first off we have Keir Starmer. The thoughts of the entire nation are with the families and everyone affected by the unimaginable horrors that unfolded in Southport. No words will ever be able to capture the depth of their pain. I want to say directly to the survivors, families and community of Southport, you are not alone, we stand with you in your grief. What happened in Southport was an atrocity, and the judge has stated this vile offender will likely never be released. Let's hope so. After one of the most harrowing moments in our country's history, we owe it to these innocent young girls and all those affected to deliver change as they deserve. Pretty much what I expected from Keir Starmer. Little more than offering condolences and, well, some words of sympathy, but ultimately it's a quote from George Orwell, where effectively English prose have been chosen in recent years, and bear in mind this is back in 1940, but they're effectively just chosen because they sound good rather than the meaning for them, like a prefabricated hen house, and effectively just to make nothing statements. And that's exactly what this is. It's a nothing statement. I feel bad for the people of Southport. Yeah, we all know that. What's going to happen though that actually changes the monumental failures around this case? Well, there's nothing really. There's not, I'll do everything in my power to make sure this doesn't happen again, I'll do something for the people of Southport, just, yeah, here's some words. But really we shouldn't be too shocked at that, given that mere hours after laying flowers at the scene where this massacre happened, it turns out Sir Keir Starmer joined celebrity Labour backers for a party in the Downing Street garden, just hours after laying flowers there, the Mail on Sunday can reveal. I don't know why it's taken this long to reveal that, but it just goes to show the attitude that we have here. What any regular leader would do is, if you remember the clip where he laid the flowers and people started heckling him, you'd stay in Southport all day. You'd meet with local people. You'd meet with the local police, paramedics, anyone else who helped out, and give them personal congratulations and make sure that at the very least, just on an optics level, your face is seen there from the point you lay the flowers until the cameras go off at midnight. And what does he do instead? He goes to see celebrities in the Downing Street garden instead, effectively seemingly forgetting about this whole entire affair. Literally, Keir Starmer basically sounds like a robot, because he is. He just effectively wants to live life on easy mode. Just, I'll keep the country running to some extent. Oh, all my left-wing nonsense positions, they'll make a utopia, and I can just sit in the garden drinking martinis with my celebrity friends, and it'll be great, because I'm a sir, don't you know? And unfortunately, the reality of Britain has hit him very hard, in that we actually have such a mess that we can't even arrest obvious mass murderers in advance of their obvious mass murdering. When that does happen, he can't even be bothered to stick around to thank the police and paramedics, even for photo opportunities. Photo opportunities are a bit cynical still, but he didn't even bother trying to do that, really. The only clips that came out of him laying the wreath include a load of people heckling him, because he's not doing a good job. And going off to have a party with celebrities, it is quintessential. It is a quintessential example of the issue we face between the new elite class and everyone else. This is the major difference. Everyone who's right-wing wants this sorted. Keir Starmer goes off to have a party with his celebrity friends to try and forget about it all. Which would you rather have in charge? Someone who's actually addressing it, or someone who's just going to ignore it until he's forced to make a speech on it, and then when he does, as I say, it's a prefabricated hen house. Anyway, moving on, here's what the Home Secretary had to say. Home Secretary's statement on the sentencing at Liverpool Crown Court. The whole country has been horrified beyond words by these truly horrendous, cowardly and evil crimes. We'll always remember Bebe, Elise and Alice, and the happiness they brought their families in their short lives. Again, do you know these girls? No, not particularly. I guess you can say that you're basing that off stories about them, but again, it's the prefabricated hen house. There's no meaning behind this. There's just this sounds like what I should say type of English prose. And we remember too the strength and bravery shown by the survivors of this horrific attack, and the astounding courage of those who rushed towards the danger and undoubtedly saved many more lives. That makes a bit more sense, because we've actually heard about that. The police and emergency services who responded that day deserve our eternal gratitude, and we thank to the investigators and prosecutors who have worked so hard for justice, Mr. Justice Goose for presiding over the hugely difficult proceedings. We have vowed to get the answers the country deserve about how this horror was allowed to happen, and ensure that lessons are learned. This is much better. We will set out further details of independent public inquiry soon, but for today, all our thoughts are with the family, enduring the unimaginable pain and the example of strength and courage that they have provided to us all. Once again, by the way, they are more than happy to have an inquiry for absolutely everything, but they are refusing to have a nationwide scandal into the grooming gangs. And once again, can we guarantee that there will be any results from this inquiry into this case? No, probably not, because too many people who want to keep power will be able to stop anything happening to them. And there will probably be lies in this inquiry as well, but we'll just have to see how it all goes. At the end of the day, a lot of girls' lives have been completely changed, and some even have ended as a result of failures throughout the British system. And they need to be found, and the system needs to be reformed so that this doesn't happen again. Now, an inquiry is a good first step, but as I say, can we guarantee that it will actually give us results? Next up is Kemi Badenoch's take on the whole situation. Axel Rudikubana should never be released from prison. His age means he is not being given a whole life sentence, despite the countless lives he destroyed on that dreadful day, and the legacy of mistrust he has sown across the country. Hang on a sec. He will not be available for parole until he is aged 70. And even then it is unlikely that, given that he has no regrets for what he did now. I don't think he will do at 70. So it's very unlikely he will be released to spend his retirement free, so let's not go nuts here. There is a strong case here for amending the law to give clear judicial discretion to award whole life sentences to under 18s, which Conservatives will start to explore. That's fine. My heart goes out to victims and their families. None of us can imagine your pain, and we owe you justice. At least that platitude was only a line long rather than 2 paragraphs, that's what I'll say. While the government inquiry is a step in the right direction, it falls short of what is needed. It must address 2 critical issues. 1, why wasn't Rudikubana apprehended sooner? And 2, the transparency of information during and after the unrest followed by this barbaric incident. Yeah, these are 2 things that I have been calling for pretty much since the murders happened. One of my greatest frustrations is the deflection that often follows domestic terrorist incidents. It is absurd that we are debating online knife sales more than we are integration and how we safeguard our society from extreme ideologies and violence. Again, absolutely fair. The thing is that he's been done under the Terrorism Act because British law is very strange. And effectively he's been done under that just for owning terrorist material rather than necessarily being a terrorist. I mean, it's one of those annoying things, but when it comes down to it, as I said in the other video, technically this was not in their wheelhouse to deal with him, because realistically, what is his ideology? You know, the kid had Mein Kampf, he also had a bunch of stuff on far left atrocities. Reality of the situation is that, yeah, the only ideology this kid had was, I just really want to kill people. That's the only ideology he had, which isn't really a coherent one. And, I mean, as I say, this is probably an issue with, when you're at Prevent, you can't just have Prevent say, yeah, he's free to go, when he's clearly a violent maniac. Just because he's not a violent maniac in the name of, oh, I don't know, Rwandan supremacy, let's say, doesn't mean that he shouldn't be referred to something. Again, these extreme ideologies and violence, like, extreme violence, yes, this was absolutely extreme violence. I'm not going through the details, as I say, but it was extreme to a point I actually nearly shed a tear from when I was reading what happened. But the ideology part, I mean, yes, we do have a problem with ideologies, but unfortunately, I don't think this one is particularly relevant. I think what is much more relevant is that 2 people came over on a refugee scheme. Rwanda is a safe country, and they weren't forced to, and they basically weren't forced to go back. Yeah, no, I will put it that way. They weren't forced to go back because they shouldn't have had leave to remain here after it's safe to go back to Rwanda. And instead, they have brought up a boy that has managed to, well, get to the point where he's killing people. And as I say, it's quite hard to get your own son or daughter done for their own crimes. We've had plenty of examples of native Brits being criminals and being protected by their parents. The Cray twins, I think, is the best example I can think of. Their mother would try and be on their side through thick and thin. But I think it's actually a deflection to try and put this on terrorism. Yeah, he had an Al-Qaeda manual, but from what I can gather, unless the inquiry finds something else, the only reason he actually used that was to find out how to murder people effectively. I don't think he really cared about the Islam stuff, to be honest with you. But anyway, we'll carry on. Keir Starmer's statement on Monday was disappointing. What statement on Monday? He didn't make a statement on Monday. He made a statement on Tuesday after the defendant pleaded guilty. He sidestepped the core issues, focusing instead on legal definitions of terrorism. By avoiding these hard truths, he inadvertently politicised our response to this tragedy. I mean, I'm not being funny, Kemi. Let's not make that attack. We kind of want to politicise this tragedy because, unfortunately, it was political issues that effectively allowed this issue to happen. Whether it be our asylum system, the mass migration we've had, the fact that, frankly, I think it's going to come out in this inquiry, or I would highly expect that some of the police officers said we didn't want to be seen as racist by arresting this black kid, is part of the reason why he never ended up where he should have been, either in a mental institution, sectioned, or in jail. Doesn't matter which, I don't really care, as long as he's away from society. And so, and also, you can't really make this politicising statement, because this is a political statement made by Kemi Badenoch, and then say, don't politicise this tragedy. No, unfortunately, this tragedy is always going to be politicised, because it is a political issue that Rudy Kubana never saw jail before he managed to get out and change 11 girls' lives for the worse and kill 3 others. Really, really poor paragraph, that, because, as well, I'm not being funny, the legal definition of terrorism, that's also part of the issue. Or, by extension, prevent only being able to deal with people who come under the legal definition of terrorism is the problem, because they should have dealt with him, obviously. The Conservatives will not avoid hard truths. We are under new leadership. We will support the government in doing the right thing. However, we will not hesitate to challenge the PM on the task he has to ensure that those we welcome into Britain share our values, contribute positively to our society, and how we make sure this continues through multiple generations. I mean, long and short of it at the end there, that last paragraph is still... Without saying it, she is kind of saying diversity is our strength. It's kind of no shock that Reform's doing so well, demanding pretty much an end to net immigration. And I know plenty of people want absolutely no inflow of immigration whatsoever, but then again, these people typically work with foreigners as well, and don't seem to be calling for them to be deported. Yes, I am basically calling out the Lotus Eaters there. But really, when it comes to Kemi Badenoch's statement, it started pretty well, and it went right off the rails by paragraph 4. That took a nosedive. Next up is Nigel Farage's statement, and there's no sugarcoating any of it from Nigel Farage and Reform, which, to be honest, I'm kind of glad to see, because they just frankly go on the attack. Dear Angela Rayner, as you'll no doubt be aware, Axel Rudy Kubana, the suspect in the horrific murders in Southport, has pled guilty to all charges put to him under Section 58 of the Terrorism Act 2000. Additionally, we now know that the PM was made aware of Mr. Rudy Kubana's terror links, but decided to conceal this information from the public. Shortly after the brutal attack, I questioned whether the public was told the truth, and whether this was, in fact, a terror incident, even when the police stated that it wasn't. And I stated... I just wonder whether the truth is being withheld from us. I don't know the answer to that, but I think it's a fair and legitimate question. What I do know is something is going horribly wrong in our once beautiful country, and all that's true, and it turns out, yeah, there was stuff kept from us. The writing was kept from us but released before the trial. The Al-Qaeda manual was kept from us but released before the trial. So all this nonsense about, oh, it could cause a mistrial is total nonsense. What is the bar for this? Why was the writing and Al-Qaeda manual allowed to be given to us early? Yet all this other information, such as the fact he had other weaponry, the fact that he brought the knife off Amazon, because apparently that's relevant, his pretty obvious, let's face it, obsession with violence, that was kept from all of us. Would this have all affected the trial? I don't particularly think so. Even if it did go to a jury and he pleaded not guilty, I don't think it would have caused too much of an issue, given that, for some reason, why are we allowed to know about the Al-Qaeda manual and the writing, but nothing else? Why does that not affect the trial, yet the other details that seem to have nothing to do with the trial, frankly, it would cause a mistrial? It doesn't make sense. In response to my comments, you stated that he, Nigel Farage, must understand that you have a level of responsibility. You're a community leader. You're elected to represent your constituency, and therefore you have a level of responsibility with that. And it's not to stoke up what conspiracy theories or what you think might happen, have happened, or lean into what you think. And, well, I suppose this is not the point Nigel Farage is making. All it took was waiting 6 months, and it turns out his conspiracy theory was basically true. Yeah, stuff was being kept from us. I'm writing to ask you to apologise, not to me, but to the millions of Britons that you deliberately misled in choosing such an inappropriate moment to spread misinformation. By choosing to make such a nakedly political point at a time of national vulnerability, you undoubtedly contributed to the civil unrest that ensued. That is a really good way to turn the Southport riots around, because, leftists are constantly trying to say it's the Farage riots, but Farage is now turning it around, saying, well, not giving this information out spread people to speculate, and because they speculated, they actually came to incorrect conclusions because you covered this all up, and therefore they rioted. He goes on to say, as Deputy Prime Minister of this country, you have a duty to respond responsibly and not ironically create fake news by criticising others for stirring up fake news when they have done no such thing. I have no doubt that you would like to take this opportunity to correct the record. Yours, Nigel Farage MP. And this, by the way, is as much as people say, oh, I wish Nigel Farage was a lot more like Trump, this is effectively him being Trump in a very British way. You've created a fake news story, you have lied about me, and now you will correct the record. And obviously, as is more than likely she won't, then they won't treat her with respect anymore, because why would they? she will happily lie about them using parliamentary privilege, which, to be fair, Nigel Farage is very used to, given that people have lied in Parliament about him before. Anyway, Reform then also made a more general statement saying, Reform UK today calling for the Director of Public Prosecutions at the CPS to resign. The judge made clear in his sentencing that Axel Rudikubana had a detailed interest in genocides and massacres and that he was in possession of an Al-Qaeda manual. The barbaric and senseless attack was clearly both political and ideological. As I said before, I think that's a bit tenuous. I think there's evidence for that. However, I'm going to be honest with you. Axel is so unwilling to actually be open about why he did any of this. It's quite hard to say one way or the other. Many crimes of much less severity have been declared as terrorism within 24 hours of the incident taking place. That is definitely true. I remember the incel shooter in, was it Portsmouth or was it Plymouth? I can't remember. But the strange thing about that one, again, is that that case actually wasn't called terrorism. Yet there was lots of calls for it to be called terrorism, and they wanted incel shooters to be added to the list. Whereas obviously having an Al-Qaeda manual is under Islamist terrorism, and so yeah, there's more evidence here to call this terrorism than the incel shooter as far as I'm concerned. The British public need to have confidence in the CPS and our police forces. Tens of millions of British citizens will find it incomprehensible how the CPS decided this was non-terror incident and maintain that position, despite, again, the fact he was done under the Terrorism Act. Those in positions of power have to be accountable and responsible for their actions. Stephen Parkinson, the Director of Public Prosecutions at the CPS, should now do the right thing and resign for CPS's negligence in this case. And I think it's right to go on the attack of people who were in charge of institutions that failed hugely in this case, absolutely massively. And importantly, it leads me to believe that Reform really do understand the issues at hand, which is that this isn't just a Parliament issue, this is a root and branch completely change up and shake up the civil service issue. Because Prevent are culpable for this, the police are culpable for this, the CPS are culpable for this. It makes sense that they are saying people who failed in this case need to face consequences. I think it's completely reasonable. And I've got to be honest on another level. I'm not really too bothered that they're not sending condolences, because the time for that was, 6 months ago when this actually happened, when the deaths and injuries were sustained by these poor girls. And around that time, that's when they were saying, I send my condolences, this is horrific. It's not an excuse to come round again when this trial is over to say, my condolences again. There's no point, and this is why I'm quite happy with Reform's response. They're not bothering with all that deflection, frankly. They are actually saying, this was a monumental failure, the time for condolences has passed, let's see some political action to make sure this never happens again. As I say, I'm quite happy to see it, but anyway, I want to go on a bit of a tangent, because going through my research on this, I ended up seeing just some crazy things from Sky News specifically. First off, there was the old classic, oh, let's not forget that diversity is our strength message. They had to get the propaganda out.
To give communities that confidence back that actually misinformation needs to be tackled, that neighbours need to stand together and communities really need to come together. Diversity is a strength. It's not something that should be feared, and actually we need to unite more.
I'll be honest here, I don't know if this is a guy that they've found and have interviewed or if it's someone who actually works for Sky News, but either way, for the reaction of all this to be, oh, diversity is our strength, it just rings hollow, and all it's going to do is make people absolutely irate. Why are you saying these platitudes? Why are you pushing forward this propaganda when we are talking about 11 girls having their lives changed for the worse because of the injuries they sustained, and then 3 others that have died? I'm obviously not really having a go at him for making any political points about this tragedy at all, because, this whole video has been about political points being made, and some are good, some are bad. But at this point in time, if you're trying to make the diversity is our strength argument right after a, let's be frank here, a black teenager killed and maimed a number of white girls, at this point, this platitude is just going to land on completely deaf ears, and as I say, go beyond that and just make people incredibly annoyed. And as I say, I don't know if this guy worked for Sky News or not, but there is actually directly now Sky journalists saying, please let's not put any blame on the police or the civil service.
No doubt in my mind, had people done their job better in the last few years in relation to this man, those girls would still be alive.
Yeah, what you saw there was a journalist saying cut the footage to camera so that the producer can see, oh, sorry, we really shouldn't be putting forward that this is the police's fault. Well, at the end of the day, I'm afraid it is. And obviously, because these Sky News pieces were being spread around, people in the local area just got fed up with it. Clearly, they were part of what they perceived to be a cover-up of complete, frankly, possibly criminal negligence from the police and from the civil service. Sky News were part of it, so this was their reaction.
Come on, pack up, get out of here, you're not welcome.
Is that well put?
Come on.
There's only one that you can listen to on a TV news.
Yeah, obviously, don't intimidate journalists, don't coerce journalists. I will be fair here, they're not exactly getting violent about all this, they're more heckling them, which is absolutely fine. And honestly, I think the heckling is completely deserved. They are clearly complicit in some sort of cover-up. You know, oh, don't let the people know that the police made screw-ups here. Keep saying that diversity is our strength. Yes, that's good stuff. And obviously, the people at Liverpool Crown Court, who were obviously there to support the families and see justice be served, obviously just had enough of this. They know Sky News are part of the cover-up effort, perceived cover-up effort, I should say. And so they're saying, go on, pack up, you're not helping us, we don't like you, get out of here, we don't like you. Perfectly reasonable. No violence, no riots, just pure shaming Sky News for being part of the problem. Anyway, speaking of police failure, the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police had some responses about the Southport riots that resulted from, well, maybe going into what it resulted from is a bit of dangerous territory, but to some extent it was certainly a reaction to this mass stabbing. Anyway, this is what the Chief Constable of Merseyside Police had to say.
I think we saw, a lot of disinformation and misinformation being spread on those social media sites, and they knew what was happening. There was violent thuggery taking place on the streets of Merseyside and indeed many other parts of the country.
Well, what misinformation? Can you please go into specifics? Because again, most of what I saw of the speculation was, this is definitely speculation, don't take my word for it, but from what I'm hearing, he may have been Muslim. Now, as far as I can tell, that's not entirely true. I mean, obviously he had the Al-Qaeda manual, and stuff gets leaked. Stuff gets leaked all the time. When it came to the Al-Qaeda manual, that probably got leaked and people made assumptions from there. Others will have heard absolutely nothing and will have just assumed it as well because, well, modus operandi. But as far as I could tell from all of the stuff going on with the riots, the misinformation was very little to do with it. Again, riots are very bad, no one should be doing it. There were plenty of other peaceful protests going on that had nothing to do with the riots as well, who had similar issues, which was that we don't want mass immigration. The asylum system is breaking down. There is violence going on all the time. Hell, yesterday there were 2 more instances of violence. 2 mass stabbings. 2 events where more than 2 people got stabbed. One was in Plymouth, one was in Croydon. It's happening everywhere and people are fed up with it. To just put this all down to misinformation is nothing but deflection. Oh, how can we blame these social media platforms that stop us from controlling the narrative? That's all this is about, and people are fed up with it. Obviously don't riot. Rioting's bad. Can't make that clear enough. There is no way I'm going to jail because they are going to try and say that I am for riots. I am not for riots. Riots are for idiots with no impulse control. That's my view on it. Don't go rioting. We're better than that.
Where those websites, where those channels were calling for people to go out onto the streets, they were conspiring and causing people and encouraging people to commit acts of violence and acts of criminal damage.
Right, if that was specifically your point from the start, I wouldn't have a problem. Yes, that should obviously be cracked down on, and it's breaking terms of service for pretty much every social media platform anyway. Unfortunately, given Mark Zuckerberg's recent conversion to being normal, for the police and for the government, effectively they're going to have to, if they want any sort of control on the narrative again, effectively ban these social media platforms. But my god, they do that, what are journalists gonna do? And they have self-interest in stopping social media from, well, effectively killing them as well. But you do that, absolutely nobody is going to vote for whatever party brings that in again, so they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Because the stuff that they are complaining about, it's already banned on all these social media sites. I mean, all right, you can have a go at WhatsApp for not looking into people's messages and actually respecting their privacy, but at the same time, you have the same issue with the mail. You have the same issue with people who go to pubs just to chat. You know, what's your answer to all this?
The social media companies need to take some responsibility for that and be a lot swifter to take that information down.
What a way to end that. She was kind of making a salient point with the, social media should probably do something about people encouraging violence at a time like this. Yep, totally reasonable. But then it goes on to, misinformation as well, though. No, they should take that down. Problem you have is that they've been caught with egg on their face too many times. The reason Zuckerberg's probably had his conversion is because he just can't get past the fact that he actually helped the Dems, and directly helped the Dems, and he knows that this was the wrong thing to do, by suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story. And so when it comes to actually, are things true or not, it turns out that the best thing that Elon Musk did was adding those community notes, because from what I've seen, it's nothing but effective. Whereas BBC Verify, I've seen absolutely nothing from BBC Verify that I would consider, frankly, good journalism. Have they established that these facts are true or not? Well, not really. And obviously, the head of BBC Verify, Mariana Springs, I've gone through some of her journalism. She lies. How are you supposed to trust that? This is the problem that they have. Governments, the media, they've been caught out on too many lies and people are fed up with it. Police as well, by the way, have covered things up in the past. I'm sorry, but Merseyside police have absolutely no trust with Liverpool, not after the Hillsborough thing. Anyway, we all knew that was going to be the deflection. One thing, though, that I have found that, frankly, I find as a proper vibe shift as a result of all this is that, one, the death penalty's back, obviously, in the conversation because Reform MPs Lee Anderson and Rupert Lowe were calling for the death penalty for Axel Ruda-Kubana, reasonably I might add. Left-wing New Elite liberals were even considering it. Here's Andrew Marr.
All my life I have been against the death penalty for the simple reason that the state makes mistakes, and that therefore the state will kill people by mistake, and that feels to me intolerable. But this character and his obscene, cowardly behaviour makes my head spin. What punishment would be appropriate? What punishment would be enough? I think we can guess what would happen to him if he was turned out onto a public street anywhere in Britain.
Now, obviously, this isn't Andrew Marr calling for the death penalty, and that's completely fine. I completely understand people being against the death penalty. I think even in general, I'm against it still, because yes, I don't particularly like the idea of the state having the power to kill its own citizens, aside from obviously when it's self-defence, when it comes to state officials, let's say. But anyway, that's a rare case. So I completely understand it, but however, people openly on air who have been left-wingers all their life, been completely against the death penalty all their life, they're having a rethink on this. This is how bad Britain has gotten. The sacred rule of never kill anyone because the death penalty can never be justified is being questioned by people who were pushing it for years. And even when it comes to, actually this is why we shouldn't have the death penalty, it makes people seem like psychopaths on the left. Best example I could find was Jonathan Pye. After reading the witness statements for the Southport attack for the first time ever, I briefly considered that perhaps bringing back the death penalty might not be such a bad thing after all. Then I regained my mental composure. I'd rather the evil C-word suffered for the rest of his miserable life in prison. What I find so funny about this is that the typically compassionate, let's have a light touch rehabilitation on crime version of the left is effectively saying, you know what? I think if he's in jail, he'll have to look over his shoulder every day. He'll have to be in solitary confinement because he'll be in so much danger. I want him scared for the rest of his life. Effectively what they're saying is that they'd rather have their money spent to keep this person in constant fear and psychological torture and possibly even physical torture for the rest of his life than rather just get it over and done with and kill him for justice. Execute him, as has been traditional in Britain for centuries, by the way. And instead, their reasoning behind, let's not kill him, is because, it's too good for him, let's torture him instead. Which I think is genuinely a bit too barbarous, even for someone like Axel Ruda-Kubana. I'd rather just do the civilised thing and have it over and done with it. If he's condemned to death, just put him to death. We don't need to hang, draw and quarter him too, as much as he may deserve it. We're in a much more civilised age. Anyway, another interesting takeaway from all this is that Keir Starmer's whole narrative on this is a new threat and we couldn't do anything about it has basically been rejected by counterterrorism experts, who said it was actually just the latest example in a litany of similar cases. Self-initiated online radicalisation has been a key factor in a string of terrorist atrocities for more than a decade, while the authorities have repeatedly warned of individuals increasingly exploring a toxic mix of different radical ideologies, conspiracy theories and violent content. Counterterrorism police and MI5 have publicly spoken of the danger posed by predominantly young men who access a confused soup of hate online, which can make it hard to assess, risk and label an incident as a terror attack. Yeah, and as I say, this is the issue with Axel Rudikubana. God knows what his actual motives were for killing the kids. Was it racial? Don't know. Was it Nazism? Probably not. Was it Islamism? Again, don't know. He had an Al-Qaeda manual, but he didn't really seem to be a practicing Muslim from what I can tell. Was he just a mentalist? Yeah, probably. And so this is why it's actually hard to pin him down on a terrorist incident, because, as I say, although there's plenty of evidence to say this may have been a terrorist attack, it is hard to pin down what it is. And if Prevent didn't find it on 3 separate occasions, that makes it even more difficult to say that. Neil Basu, the former national head of counterterrorism, said, "This is methodology as we've seen it for the last 8 or 9 years, but it is gathering pace. It's effectively terrorist methodology by someone we can't necessarily prove is a terrorist." So even the counter-terrorists are saying, yeah, this was pretty much terrorism, but it's actually hard to nail down exactly what type of terrorism it is. That's why they're not saying it's a terrorist incident, which again, I think is fair and a problem with procedure more than anything. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, Reform are trying to say this should obviously be called terrorism. Let's change the law and get rid of the person in charge of the CPS who's, frankly, just too in love with the system as it works now. Basu said that when he retired in 2021, the mixed, unclear and unstable suspect category, someone who did not align with a particular ideology but was set on violence, represented about 40% of casework. Again, this is not a new threat. This is literally 40% of the incidents that the terror police had to get their heads around in 2021, 4 years ago, 3 years before the incident. Ian Akeson, a former prison governor who is also director of community safety at the Home Office, warned that the threat was not new, but it was evolving. Well, of course it is. It's all online. Online's always evolving. People who are mobilised by hatred and contempt for others into committing lone wolf attacks, they've been with us for years. The PM has made a mistake there. It's ludicrous, frankly. I'm not sure whether it was deliberate or if it wasn't thought through. Perhaps he's trying to give an intellectual ballast to his decision to have a public inquiry. Anyway, I think with that is pretty much everything I need to cover today, because absolutely none of these responses have been shocking or surprising to me. Everyone's done pretty much what I expected, and, well, as usual, Kemi Badenoch's about, 50% good, 50% car crash. Nigel Farage is pretty much doing everything I'd want and expect him to do, and Keir Starmer's trying to deflect as usual. Oh, and the mainstream media have effectively been following their guidelines, so I can't blame them too much, but Sky's obviously going fully overboard with the diversity is our strength route. So, yeah, screw 'em. But for now, it's shill time. Next Monday, we're back with the Antiquity streams over on the Worcester Club, still going through the Peloponnesian Wars if you're interested. Tuesday it is a newscast over on the Worcester Club as well, so do come along to that to see what I have to say about stories of the week. And then Friday, I think it'll be Friday, we'll have Laughing at the Guardian returning, so look forward to that. Videos out as and when I can make them. As for how you can support the channel, do subscribe, leave a comment telling me what you think about all of this nonsense, and also leave a like. Free and easy ways to support the channel. If you want a non-free way, you can always become a member for £2 a month, or you can send a super chat or super thanks on any video or live stream that I do. Really direct ways to help the channel, really keeps me going. As for that though, that's everything I had for you for today, so once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.